So we're going to review making a poster using our Markdown. As you can see, I'm already in our studio, and just a reminder, I've used the window layout option to put my console on the right, and that's just because I think it's easier for me when I'm teaching. And you should, if you followed the instructions, you should have over in your files, you should have a folder that says our Markdown. And inside of that folder, you should have a file that says poster that's got some information already included, and we're going to use that as a template. So if you don't have it, there should also be a template that you can open using File New or Markdown. There's a bunch of options already set in here about the top of your page, for example, and some major headings. So in our Markdown, we can always remember that a hashtag is used to indicate the heading, and one hashtag is a major heading. Two hashtags are subheading number one, and you can continue with subheadings. That's up to you. I also, before we start, because we are using our Markdown, so I just wanted to point out to you that here in the Help menu, there's a couple of useful things here. So first of all, there's the Markdown Quick Reference. If you click on that over in your Help screen, you actually get some basic information. I would say it probably solves most of the questions, 90% of the questions that you might have. If you have things that you want to know how to do, like how to make a superscript, or how to put a block quote or something like that, that's going to be right in there. And you'll see later that I might have to use it. Also, there is the cheat sheets, and there's a whole bunch of these. There is also one for our Markdown, and there's the R Markdown reference guide. So if you have questions about how to do something in R Markdown, these are good places for you to look. I can say I always look at this quick reference guide because mainly I can never remember how to do things like make a table if I wanted to make a table, or to insert an image, things like that. So now let's go back to our files. So here we have some basic files set up. And as I mentioned, the top part has information that's kind of what's called meta information, information about your poster. That's going to include your title. So I've been working on the sunburn question. So I'm going to make my title sun sunscreen use. I think sunscreen is 2 words. And health and knowledge of sun risks. Okay, and of course I'm going to put my name instead of generic your name. And then here I'm going to put Department of Sociology. And you would put whatever whatever your major is. And for right now, you could always change the logos, but I have the Lehman logo and the iCore logo in there for you. Um, I actually have picked primary uh, colors and secondary colors and so on. Um, but you are free to change those colors. These are called hex codes, and there's a million places on the web where you can find like different the hex codes for different colors. So even right now, um, I can save this file and go ahead and knit it, and it will uh, set up the um, poster for you. And you can see right now that it's got the major headings are have the special background color, and the second headings don't have a second separate special background color or font or anything. You can change that if you want to do whatever you want. And then you can open that in the browser, which is something I suggest that you always do. And then you can see again what it looks like as of now, which is kind of not a very complete poster. So now we want to go ahead and start putting in some information. Now I'm going to say I'm going to treat this like one of those cooking shows where you have, they put something in the oven and say, now cook for 2 hours, and 30 seconds later, they take it back out of the oven. So I've already worked on a poster, and I'm just going to do a lot of copy and pasting from my ready-made poster. I did not change the colors at all. Okay, just checking, but it could have changed the colors. So I first want to just notice that I've set a couple options in here that are not the options that we necessarily use all the time. But for something like a poster, most of the time you're not going to want to show your code. And so I put echo equals false because that means don't show the code, just show the results. And then I put message equals false because you may have noticed that some packages, when you load them, you get a bunch of messages, and I don't want that on my poster either. So we can this is part of making a nice looking poster, is thinking about some of those options. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is add a code chunk to load my packages. So remember, to add a code chunk, you can use this little green thing and click on R because that's what we're using. And then I'm going to go ahead and load the 4 packages that I'm using. I'm using the Easy Stats package, the iCore 26 package, ggplot2, and sjplot. And sjplot is a new one, which I'm going to use because it's going to be nice in one of my data analyses. Okay, so I want to say I'm going to be doing copying and pasting, and it's just like a cooking show. Of course, they're hiding all the prep work that was done, and I'm not going to go through my prep work. Let's just say I've done enough work here to be able to have my introduction. It didn't take 5 minutes to do. It didn't take that long because this isn't that tricky a topic at all. But I did do some research on skin cancer and on sun use of sunscreen. And I did that using JSTOR and Google Scholar and just the general internet, Google or DuckDuckGo. So I'm going to go ahead and paste in my introduction, if that works. Now, the introduction is important in a poster because we don't have like a separate abstract in the poster. So this is leading us to have to put some summary information, and also in the introduction, what you're trying to do is more or less set up your analyses and grab the audience interest. So in my introduction, I included some basic information. I'm going to say in a poster, you you don't have to necessarily put as many citations in the text. You still have to have them, but I'm not going to put them after every sentence or here. Um, and I talk about how skin cancer is the most common cancer. I talk about the CDC, and see here, I just have a brief citation. I could go back. Probably should add the year there, but it's not, I didn't spell out Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, just as an example, because in a poster, space is precious. I talk about that most skin cancers are caused by UV light and that it's important all year, the rate of cancer. And then this is important. It says there are major differences in the rates and types of skin cancers and locations of cancer across racial and ethnic groups. Hispanic and Black Americans are more likely to be diagnosed at late stages of skin cancer than white Americans. And I talk about that you can reduce your risk. And I talked to here about some of the literature that I found. It says, although people of all races get skin cancer, researchers, oops, typo, every time you read it over, you'll find typos, I guarantee, have found that medical textbooks and educational materials for the public often focus exclusively on fair, i.e., white skin. This may lead both patients, doctors and patients, to ignore the risk of UV rays to those with darker skin. There's also some research that indicates that some people believe that people with dark skin cannot get sunburned, or in some cases can't get skin cancer. While melanin does provide protection, it does not provide total protection. In particular, soles of feet and nail beds have higher risk than the rest of the body. So here I should have put a citation, so I'm going to just put add citation here. And you'll see I do have a citation that talks about misinformation. So the next thing that we have is objectives. So here again, you're going to keep it brief because it's a poster and you don't have a lot of room. So I am going to put two objectives. The first objective is to determine the relationship of knowledge of the dangers of sun exposure to racial and ethnic identity, meaning basically, am I going to see differences between white, Black, Hispanic, Asian in terms of what their knowledge of sunscreen, the dangers of sun exposure are. And number two is to assess the extent to which knowledge of the dangers of sun exposure relate to changes in the use of sunscreen. So in other words, I have kind of a two-step model. Race and ethnicity is going to predict how much misinformation people have about the sun's dangers, and then misinformation may lead to change of behaviors. Why does that matter? Because if we can protect, if it's known that you can protect your skin from skin cancer, but you don't have that information, you don't believe that the sun has dangers for everyone, then you may not be able to may not take care of yourself, and that may ultimately mean that your risk of cancer is higher. Okay, now the next part is methods. Now, we all know that we're using the RSS data for this purpose. So I'm going to put just a little bit of information about my methods, and I would say I probably could use some more details in this, but for now, it's good enough. So here, the RSS surveys are topical surveys administered to U.S. adults. The first round of RSS includes a set of questions about sunburn risks and sunscreen use. And hypothesis one is going to be that people who have more incorrect information about sunburn will use sunscreen less often than those with correct information. And the rationale is that using sunscreen requires taking action and also expenses. And they talk about, that's one of the questions in the survey, is how much spending money is a factor in use. And then if someone does not think sunburn is a problem, they won't make the effort or spend the money. Hypothesis two is that people racialized as white will be less likely to agree with misinformation than those racialized as black or Hispanic. And the rationale goes back to the introduction. Racialized information on skin cancer, emphasizing the risk for fair skin, leads both to the general population and doctors to minimize the risk among people with darker skin. Therefore, we expect that groups on average have darker skin will tend to have less accurate information on the risks of sunburn. I want to say I use the term racialized here because in sociology, we understand race as a socially constructed category where people basically have labels attached to them. And this is the term that a lot of people are using now to mention the variable, so we don't want to just say race, because that sounds like some kind of inherent biological concept. Okay, now we're going to go up to results. All of a sudden in result, and I'm going to say also I probably should have more details here, maybe about the specific questions that I'm using. This could have a little bit more heft to it. For results, that's actually the meat of your poster. It's the most important part. It's also the hardest part really to do, because that's where you're putting all of your data analysis and you're trying to put it in a summary form. So here I'm going to just give a little bit of an introduction. Here's where I actually say what the dependent variables are. One is how often use sunscreen on either your face or your skin. That's as part one. And then I'm going to add a whole analysis right here. And I'll go through what I did. So I ended up playing around with the layout on my poster a lot. And so I have it done in a certain way, and you may decide to do it differently. So I decided that since I'm using, there's actually two questions about use of sunscreen. One is about using it on your skin in general, and one is about using it specifically on your face. So the first, I'm going to do two graphs here that will show me how this question of using it on your skin but not excluding the face um, relates to this misinformation about the risk of cloudy days. This isn't, you'll see we've done this before. I'm going to use means by group. And I did have to say here to use this has the frequency of sunscreen use, and it goes through always from never to always. And the independent variable here is going to be agreement with the statement that the there's no long-term harm to sunburn. And I have actually decided that I just want to show the plots. So I use the pipe here and say, make a plot. And then I use a plus sign so I can add some labels. And then idea here, and it's really no long-term risk. Okay, so I set up an X label and a title. Let's just run it. I won't go through all the options. Because it's means for the dependent variable, I do have to make sure that I am making that dependent variable numeric, because it has to be numeric in order to calculate a mean. Okay, so now I get my two plots. Plot one is kind of interesting because number one, it didn't print my labels, so I had to figure out why. Number two is here's the categories. So this is increasing agreement with misinformation. And this is the how the mean of how often do you use sunscreen, where higher numbers mean more use. So as we would expect, for the first three levels here of, strongly disagree, somewhat agree, it goes down. The more you agree with the misinformation, the less you use sunscreen. But then we have this strange thing over here for the fourth one. People who strongly agree with that statement also tend to use sunscreen. That is kind of unexpected and for me, so that's something that we could definitely think about. Now here is for sunscreen on the skin, where it says how much risk is there. There's not much risk of sunburn on a cloudy day. And here I'm seeing that that makes more sense to me. The less risk, the less likely you are to be using, you perceive, right? The less likely you are to be using sunscreen. Oh, I should note that here we can see this is topics that haven't been covered in the workshop yet, but they're coming up. This is saying that the p-value that has been covered. The p-value is less than 0.001. So we would say that there's a statistically significant relationship between the variables. The r squared is how much variance is explained. So 0.042, if you multiply that by 100, it's like 4.2%. 4% of the variance is explained by in the dependent variable by the independent variable. And this also has the a statistically significant effect, slightly larger. Probably makes some sense. Anyway, so here is the first set. Now I have some more that I'm going to do. Oh, and I want to say that after some experimentation with getting my overall poster to look right and look good, I decided to put fig.height equals 4 for this set of graphs in this section. So you will also probably have to play around with your poster to get it to look really good. I'm not, and to make sure that it fits. You might make things bigger, or you might make things smaller. Okay, here's my next set. Here is the same kind of graphs, but in this case, it's frequency of use on the face as opposed to on the skin. So here I have, okay, this is the one, the first one here is cloudy. On a cloudy day, what's the risk? And this again makes sense. You know, you're less likely to use it on your face if you don't believe basically that there's risk from the cloudy day. And then I have this same weird relationship here with with the belief that strongly agreeing that there's no long-term harm from sunburn. I don't know why, what that's about, but I think it's a very important issue to delve into further because it could be a problem with the question, but it could also be maybe some people use sunscreen not because of that. Maybe they just like it, or maybe their family tells them they have to use it. I mean, there could be a lot going on with that. So, and I'm not sure yet what that's about. So you'll see how I deal with that when I actually talk about it. So here, then I'm going to actually write some text that explains what we're seeing in this graph. So hypothesis 1 is generally supported. For example, those who agree that there is no risk from the sun on cloudy days use sunscreen on their face less often, and the result was statistically significant at the 0.001 level. However, the results for disagreeing that sunburn is not harmful in the long run are less clear. Those who strongly agree with the misinformation have a similar sunscreen use to those who strongly disagree. The unexpectedly high sunscreen use for this group should be investigated further. Okay, now I have another set. I actually have 3. This is what I said, that the results part is the longest, most complicated part. So now I'm going to have some more graphs. And in these graphs, I'm basically looking at race, the race variable, which is p underscore race underscore r variable, and the 2 perceived risks or understanding of the risks of sunscreen. So either that the sunburn doesn't cause harm in the long run, or that there's no risk on a cloudy day. So I can run that and see that I have some results. And I can basically say here that there's not huge differences between the groups in the sense that they're all between 1.6 and 1.8. But we do see that whites overall have the lowest means and blacks overall have the highest on this one. And then for the second graph, I can see that again, whites have the lowest. They're very consistent here, whereas blacks have the highest misinformation, and there's pretty much a tie between Hispanic and other. And I think this is interesting because it really does get to this idea of racialization and skin colors. So people who are considered not white, when they put so much emphasis on fair skin as a risk factor, that really may make everybody who's not white think that they don't have a risk. And by the way, they also use blonde hair as a risk factor. So people who are, some people are Asian or Hispanic have very fair skin, but maybe they don't have blonde hair. So they're getting all these messages that may be minimizing their risks. So here, that's what those graphs are telling. Now, I'm also doing a regression analysis, and you haven't covered that yet in the workshop, but it is going to be covered eventually, so I'm just going to put it in. And pulse analysis. So what's complicated here is that we have a lot of different variables and we're looking at each one separately. But what if the two variables are actually associated with each other? Well, how does that impact, maybe how much of the effect is due to one variable versus another variable when you have two variables that you think are important. So regression analysis, among other things, it lets us put in more than one predictor. And that's great. We can have more than one predictor. And so here, here I am, I don't even know what that's showing. Sorry, my monitor went nuts. Okay, so for the regression analysis, I'm just going to show you how to do it now. If you feel like if you've had statistics before, you may know this already. And if you haven't, you may have seen these in an article. So I'll just go ahead and do this. And the good thing with this is that, like I said, we can put the whole thing together. So here, what I decided to do was just use the using sun on the skin, but I could have done using sun on the body. I'm on the face, but I thought using sun on the face, that could be sunscreen on the face, could be due to other things. For example, maybe people don't want wrinkles and they're more worried about wrinkles than they are about skin cancer. So I decided to use the skin question. And what I thought I'd do is I want to use, hey, what's their perception of the risk on cloudy days? And what's the perception of the risk in general of long-term harm of sunscreen? So thinking of those as two separate pieces, two separate variables, and trying to understand maybe there's some subtle differences there, like people who understand about the cloudy day issue maybe are more interested or knowledgeable. There could be like additional information above and beyond the general concern about long-term risks of sunscreen. And then I'm putting in the race variable and I'm putting in the gender variable. So, and it's just plus plus, you just connect them, use the LM function, which stands for linear model. And I put the data set name and it's going to let me do that. Now, why did I put that in? Well, if you have watched my other videos, you know that I already had a hypothesis that maybe gender is also related to healthcare information, that women may just generally be better informed about the risk, all different kinds of health risks and health information. Uh, and the cool thing about regression is that you can include both numeric variables and the quantitative the categorical variables. Okay, and I'm going to run this, and this is what people usually do. You save the results of the regression to an object, and then I'm going to use this tab model, uh, short for the table of the model, to actually render my model for the poster. And that's why I added that SJ plot to the beginning, because that's going to give me a nice layout of my regression results. So if I run this, oh, what just happened? Error. Oops, because I don't think I loaded SJ plot. So now I'm going to go ahead and run this, and it loads up fine this time. And now I'm going to go back down to the part of this. By the way, if you have any problems like I just had, always make sure to contact someone rather than get frustrated with them. So now I'm going to run this, and we can see over here it pops up a table of my results. And again, I can make this table look better as I'm working on my poster. I might polish it up a little bit. But right here, what it does is it gives me a list of each of my independent variables. It gives me the title of my dependent variable. That's what I'm trying to explain. So when outdoors, how often use sunscreen on other exposed skin? And let's just look. So this says that this variable, the dis how much you disagree with the statement that there's no risks during a cloudy day. In other words, the higher your misinformation level, the lower your frequency of use of sunscreen. And that's statistically significant. These are the p-values. So that's statistically significant at less than the 0.001 level. And then separately, I have the independent variable sun no harm, which is that there's no long-term harm of sun use, of sunburn. And here it's negative. It's not quite as big as the cloudy day. And what we have is that it's statistically significant overall, you're less likely to use sunscreen. Your frequency of sunscreen use is lower. Depend if um, your misinformation is higher. And remember, this is even with that weird nonlinear result that we had, where the very misinformed uh, had actually higher levels of sunscreen use. Then what it does is give us, for the race variable, it breaks it into the effects of each of the categories. And it notice that here's Black non-Hispanic, other non-Hispanic, and Hispanic. So what's happening here is these results are relative to white non-Hispanic. So compared to white non-Hispanics, Black non-Hispanic have a negative. Being a Black non-Hispanic leads to less sunscreen use on your body, with a probability of p-value of negative point zero of sorry a p-value of less than 0.001. So that's statistically significant. uh, but the other ones are also negative, but they're much smaller, and that basically aligns with what we saw in the earlier graphs here, where we looked at this one is the one on misinformation of sunscreen use by race on a cloudy day. And we saw that Hispanic and non-Hispanic are kind of in between. They're similar to each other. They're kind of in between white and Black, which define the extremes. Here, for the other question, there's really even less of an effect, right? I mean, yes, the whites are lower, the dots are lower, but you can see from the whiskers here that the the estimates kind of overlap a lot. So the big dramatic difference is Blacks compared to whites. So let's go look at this. Then I'm gonna have I should really have a little more maybe write up, but it does explain this. The table does have the R squared here. This is the variance explained. So this is 0.09. That means 9% of the difference in overall variation in sunscreen use is explained by this model. It's not very much, actually, but in sociology, sometimes that's what we get, is small effect sizes. So next steps. So next steps is important because we want to always think about, like, okay, we're researchers. What are we going to do now? What are we going to take this information and actually, take more, do more research on it? So here I mentioned we could possibly incorporate other variables into the model. We know that from some other articles, there's questions about where do people get their information, and especially if they get their information from social media, they may get more misinformation. If they get it from other sources, maybe they'll have less information, less inaccurate information. So those are some ideas that I have. And I definitely want to explore more about this strongly agree group. Okay, and then I'm going to have my conclusion. And this is where I kind of come back to the big picture. And my conclusion is that overall, these findings support sociological research that has identified ways in which medical information is almost always shown in reference to white bodies. While the need for education about the dangers of UV rays is clear, success at reducing skin cancer among African Americans and to a lesser extent Hispanics and others will require addressing structural issues of a racialized healthcare system. So I feel like I'm a little out of I probably need to do a little more explaining here of what I was talking about. Now, but this is just a draft. And now key references. I actually decided to change this title to supplemental materials. And this is where I'm going to put my QR code and I'm going to put a photo. So how do I do that? First of all, let's just say that I went ahead and created a Google document with my references. Okay, so these are everything that I reference. And I don't have any supplemental tables or graphs yet, but I probably might want to add some, like just maybe some overall description of the sample in terms of race and gender, region of the country kind of thing. And there might be some other questions like maybe just like a frequency distribution of some of the variables. I didn't put all the frequency distributions in there, but I would like to show maybe how few people strongly disagreed or strongly agreed with the misinformation. So, okay, how do I make a QR code? There's different ways you can do that. One thing I did was I chose to here where it says share, I said publish to the web. Okay, and that is going to give me like a link to a quote published version. And I leave this checkbox because I'm going to go back and probably add more to it. So it's going to automatically republish. So if I go over here on my browser, now I get this web page with my supplemental references. I can change around that file. I might want to put my name on it, for example, or the title of my poster or something. How do you make a QR code? Okay, there's all kinds of crazy websites that make QR codes for you, but here's a trick. I'm just going to click on this and it says create a QR code for this page. Boom. And I can download it or I can embed it with this link, right? So, yeah, maybe I'll just, I guess I'll download it. And save it wherever. You'll probably save it in your downloads folder or whatever folder you're using for the project. So now I'm going to go back over to RStudio and I'm actually going to create a folder here called images just because it's a way to keep your work organized. So here I'm going to call it images. So this will be for any images that relate to any of our markdown file. And here's images. And now I'm going to go ahead and upload my files. Yes, because I've cleverly already got this marked. Oh no, I don't have it marked. I'm going to go over to here's my QR code, and here's, so I'm going to upload that. And I also have prepared my headshot. So you can use any photo of yourself that you have. It's nice to kind of have that photo. So now I have these ready to go. Okay, so next up, I'm gonna show you, and as usual, I had to go look and remember how to link to my supplemental to an image. So this is how I do it for my QR code. And I put width equals 25% because I was playing around with it already, trying to get a good layout that I thought looked nice. And I don't want it to be too big or too small. And then here's my headshot. I want them like next to each other. You'll see, you feel like at the beginning, how in the world will I fill up this whole empty poster? But once you start putting your images in and stuff, you're going to see that it fills up really, really quickly. And you might have to do things like, I think I mentioned before that here I use the fig.height option to limit these to 4, just to make sure I had enough room for everything. Oh, and I wanted to mention something else, which is, so I paired them up because I wanted these two to be next to each other as opposed to above and below. So I put them inside the same code chunk. If I wanted them separate, I would put them into a separate code chunk. Okay, this you don't really need, you could probably take this out. Well, you should really put this information in about the packages that you use should be in your supplemental materials. So I'll try to make sure to analyze that later. And here I would definitely want to include this will actually automatically generate the file for you, which is nice. I might want to include easy stats and iCore 26 and ggplot and sj plot, like that. Well, don't worry about it, but it is something people, sometimes students don't realize. You should include the software that you use in your bibliography. So since we have lots of room in our Google document, there's no problem adding those. Okay, so here, now I'm going to try first pass at knitting this. So Posterdown, the reason we use Posterdown is because it is all formatted to make a poster. So I'm going to try again, like always happens. And now we can see that I have my poster. And this is just in the pop-up window. but I'm actually, you're going to see a problem here. Oh, that worked. Why didn't this work? The thing is that your pop-up window is not, it's just a rough preview. So it's better to go ahead and open it in a browser. And this will actually, oh, it still didn't fit. Last time I did it, it fit. So and this is the alt text actually. So maybe that's part of the problem. Uh, we'll look at that in a second. So again, this is how it's trial and error. Also here, the regression analysis, like the title is here and the results are over here. So I want to fix that. I want to get them all together. Um, I do, and actually, if I shrink down my poster, I can kind of get an overview of what it looks like. And it's still very readable um, because this is actually rendering to a full-size poster. So if you shrink down the font, it's just putting it back down to like a normal reading font. And you can see here, this is probably in a reading, if I was just reading it on the web, I would want to make these bigger because they're a little hard to read. I still need to do some work on them anyway. And here, but that's what it looks like. So now my job is to go back and now I have to make my font size bigger again. Okay, so I can actually read it. Uh, and I would want to play around with this, like maybe I have to make these even smaller. By the way, this text, so to insert an image, remember I said I always have to look that up. You put exclamation point, you put the alt text. Alt text is like for people who can't are visually impaired, and if there was a screen reader, they would be reading it out loud. Unfortunately, on a poster, you don't have a screen reader. You're going to be like live and in person, and so you don't really need a headshot. I mean a an alt text in the same way. So let's see if reducing the alt text adds helps with that. And here, one thing I did with the regression analysis is it's not great, but you can do this. These are hard returns. So that means that, usually when everything just wraps automatically, and you might have noticed that even if I have a lot of spaces in between my paragraphs or something, it it doesn't tend to show because the processing just kind of gets rid of a lot of extra spaces, but this is kind of forcing it to have extra spaces. So I'm going to get rid of this and get rid of this. I have this open. Oh, this is the Google Doc. This is the published. So now I'm going to try to knit it again. There's definitely a lot of trial and error in this process. And let's make it smaller. Still running over there. So I'm going to have to play around with that. But you can see that my QR code is there. This is over there. So I have to figure out how to, sorry. make it show up. Okay, make it still show, but at least now my regression table is all in one column. I'm going to play around with this and maybe I don't want to make it too much smaller, but I could, or I guess it's not really the text that's causing it. So what I'm going to do is play around with it some more. Um, oh, this I still need to open. So now if I open it in my browser, here I am. Now in the browser, both of them are showing up pushed over. So it's really important to look in the browser to make sure that because the pop-up thing can be deceiving. So that's my next, those making some of those kind of fixes. That's going to be my next task. And I am probably going to do something like maybe use some special HTML or something to make that work. And I'll publish like a more advanced version of the video later. But in the meantime, you can definitely get started on making your poster and just don't wait till the last second. Keep working on it step by step. And that way it's totally ready to go when you are right at the last minute trying to finish it up.